Hello, and welcome to Voices from the Left. I'm your host, Craig. Thanks for listening. Our quote: "The overthrow of bourgeois rule can be accomplished only by the proletariat, the particular class whose economic conditions of existence prepare it for this task and provide it with the possibility and the power to perform it." Vladimir Lenin. This episode we'll be speaking with Matt Luttrell, a labor organizer from Kentucky. He has experience with the Amazon Labor Union and the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee, among other organizing work. Welcome, Matt. Thanks for joining me.
Hey there, and hey everybody who's listening.
Yeah, excellent. So Matt, can you tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, kind of what has radicalized you, or got you to the point you are today?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I'm from Kentucky. Originally from northern Kentucky. I grew up in a little city right across the river from Cincinnati called Covington. And Covington was just a place, man, just a sort of inner city neighborhood, kind of devastated by loss of industry, like many places that you would consider Midwestern. It was a place of a lot of poverty, of course, place of a lot of class contradictions. And then when I was like, and part of what radicalized me is I grew up, as far back early as I can remember, I was growing up during the financial crisis. So being like 7 years old, having my parents split apart and then having all of, just everything being rough, just being poor as hell. It didn't radicalize me to the left, but I remember being disenfranchised as a kid with health issues, as a kid with ADD that my parents didn't really do anything about, didn't really seek treatment or anything like that. But I was radicalized to the right before I was ever radicalized to the left, for sure. Um, I I rejected Christianity at an early age. I remember becoming an atheist when I was like 12 years old or something like that. I inherited a Bible from my grandma passing away,
Hmm.
and I read the damn thing. So many Christians out there haven't done that. So I read the damn thing, and I was disappointed to say the least. I thought this shit was pretty evil, and I burned it. I burned the
Nice.
Bible.
Very nice.
And then I started listening to people like what do they call it? The four horses of atheism. The Nash, Sam Harris, of course. Then you have
Dawkins, probably.
Dawkins,
I can't remember their names. Hitchens, maybe. Hutchins.
Hitchens.
Yeah, I know what you're referencing. I can't recall their names though.
Yeah. And of course, that was around the age that I was first on social media. So my dad's like, okay, you're allowed to have a Facebook account now. Got me a Facebook account together. I started using social media like that. So I started trying to find groups that were interesting to me. As a
Sure.
young hooligan, I found all these stoner culture related groups, atheist related groups, just anything that was wild and out there.
Right on.
But yeah, I started sort of rebelling against authority pretty early. So I was jumped to about 15 years old, got the Trump campaign going on. Well, I'm already living in a rural area by that time, and that's what everybody hears about. So yeah, I started getting introduced through politics from that and the anti SJW gamer type of people that were popular on YouTube at that time.
Sure.
Um, so yeah, I kind of just fell down the algorithmic pipeline that gets you going from sort of milk toast content over to like Richard Spencer content.
Sure.
Yeah, but and then I think I was about 18 when I started becoming sort of an actual anarchist. There were events that were going on. Epstein's Island. Oh boy. And then I'm like, hey, didn't Trump go to that island too?
A lot of people went to that island.
Yeah. It's not it's something that we laugh about now, but people weren't really laughing at it back then.
I mean, it's still really not cool, but you know,
No, it's not.
no.
Oh God. And yeah, that started to wake me up a little bit that hey, these guys are they all hang together, they're all the same. They all have the same interest at heart. And soon after that was Gilets Jaunes, the French protests that were just huge and on everybody's mind in 2019.
Mm.
The French decided to strike over something that Americans are just sort of in awe about. They were protesting over a slight increase in diesel fuel prices. But in Europe, everybody's driving a diesel because that's just how they make their cars. Over in the United States, you think about trucks on diesel. But yeah, these French were devastated about that. But that's what got me introduced to sort of the black bloc anarchists. So I went away from sort of the anarcho-capitalist types that I was into at the time, and then I started listening to real anarchists and stuff, which made me actually for real saying ACAB. I was still a racist piece of shit, still a racist, sexist piece of shit, but I was saying ACAB and starting to listen to real anarchists and get away from that capitalist bullshit. Right after that, the Gilets Jaunes protests go on for about a year, and then you have COVID coming to the United States. Well, what happens to me? I get laid off from a job that I was working. Pretty pissed about that. So I was working for a manufacturer of car parts. The Toyota assembly plant shut down, so we had nobody to make parts for because they were shut down, not working. They had to lay us off too. Had to in air quotes.
Yeah.
They wouldn't just like have us making hand sanitizer or whatever, which was something that we needed to do as a society. What was that called? They had invoked the Defense Production Act or something
Yep.
for some companies. They didn't do that at that company, of course. Soon as I get back from fucking work, as soon as I get back to work, uh, that's when I get my actual unemployment checks because Kentucky's little unemployment system was overwhelmed by all the influxes of these new unemployment claims, just like 2 million of them or something like that. Jeez.
Sure.
And that really woke me up to like nobody out there is looking out for us. Not one bit. These uh these capitalist notions of charity is gonna be there to help the people when they need it the most. Yeah, no, that wasn't true at all.
Right.
Yeah, as a 20-year-old, that just woke me up to that. Um, so I get back to work and they start working us just suicide shifts all the fucking time. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, 8 hours on Sunday, and for bullshit pay, right? No raises, nothing extra for doing all of that hard work. But I did discover one thing that got me to hate this corporation. They were working us because they got found price fixing with their close partner Hitachi Metals. They were price fixing in my department, the brake hose department.
Nice.
So yeah, yeah, it was horrible. What they had to pay out like $4 million, something like that. And that is exactly why we were working all this fucking overtime.
Sure.
I got pretty disillusioned with that after half a year of
Yeah.
all that overtime. So I was burnout. I was experiencing burnout for like the first time in my life. And then I get over to Amazon in February of 2021. And by then the labor movement's like in full swing, man. Chris Smalls is getting popular. You have the Amazon employees over in Bessemer, Alabama. That was a big campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And that woke me up to seeing them. And I'm like, hey, this looks like a good fucking ideal. Unionize. So it got me obviously researching unions and researching sort of the syndicalist ideology that unions care about. So yeah, I think that's good for my radicalization right there. Is
Sure. Sure. So yeah, I know you brought up Amazon, which segues nicely into my next question. So you had mentioned, I think at one point you had a volunteer safety position. Was that with Amazon or was that at the other job?
Oh, that was at Amazon.
Yeah, okay. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I was on a couple of these safety programs. One of them was called GEMBA, and it was a shift specific kind of program. You would go and survey workers and talk to them about what their grievances were, what was sort of bothering and affecting their efficiency, and what was affecting their safety. You go there to survey them about a couple of things, but then they go and they tell you a lot more than you were than you were biting off, right? It's sort of like being a shop steward, which I got into that position because I knew that, hey, if I wanted to organize a union at Amazon, I had to put myself in a position where I could actually talk to people regularly, where I could hear what was on everybody's minds, what they actually wanted to change, and why. But I tried that route of getting management to fix things, staying on their ass, making all of these reports about things that were unsafe, doing all these presentations to all the managers, and having them promise to fix something. Um, well, the deadline to fix those things would pass over and over again, and I'd have to go and chew them up again. Um, and no, eventually, just I started witnessing a lot of people getting hurt by the very things that we were trying to get fixed. Overstuffed bins as sort of a primary issue, and what that means was, you got all of these bins. They're sort of made out of cardboard and they're stuffed beyond capacity. And so employees will have to try and open up those bins so they can actually find their item. But everything they do to try and be safe, like work a little bit more slowly or take a little bit more time to find the item, it always counts against you. So employees are nervous, they're stressed out, they're trying to work fast as possible to stay within a good rate at Amazon, and they're hurting themselves doing it. So it got personal when my partner got hurt, when she started getting sore every day and eventually wound up with carpal tunnel in both wrists. That was one of the moments that really lit a fire under my ass. And then they opened up a new safety position after that. They opened up, so I stayed on the Gimba position, but they opened up something called the safety committee that was a little bit more experimental. So they were communicating with their whole network of fulfillment centers to build that out. And essentially, you make reports on safety issues to corporate safety divisions within the company, and you would actually assign your managers deadlines and stuff like that. Which was, I thought it was cool at the time. I'm like, hey, what are they gonna use this for? But I just used it to agitate and organize,
Right. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
to give me something to blow off steam on managers about.
Sure.
because I said whatever the heck I wanted to them
Nice.
to try and get them to do something.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and the idea that you would bring them things, it was just a smokescreen, right? It was just all bullshit from management to be like, yeah, we'll have a safety position, we'll have things you can bring us, and we'll fix. Like that's just to pretend like they're doing a good job, right? It's
Yeah,
not to
absolutely.
actually make the company better, right? Or make the working conditions better. It's all part of the grift. It's nonsense.
Yeah, and that's something that a lot of people started to understand. They started to understand, like, hey, none of this stuff is getting done. I was going up there and telling workers, like, hey, I know they're not going to fix this, but what's on your mind?
Right. Yeah, you almost have to preface it just to have the conversation late, after a while of it not being fixed, right?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
I was just recruiting for the union drive at that point with this stuff.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I had to still like write down my notes, write down who I talked to, write down what was an issue that they said, stuff like that, and then go and have the conversation with my manager and all them. If I wanted to stay on the program, which it was to our benefit that I stayed on the program. Um, which nowadays, if you talk to Amazon organizers, they've actually weaponized that program to like have these safety committee and Gimba people following associates that are known to be organizers and spying on them and snitching on them.
Sure. Of course.
Which, yeah, I hate that it's
Yeah,
been weaponized to that degree.
that's crap. So you were, in addition to the safety position, like it sounded to me like from our previous discussion, you had done some other union organizing while you still worked at Amazon. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
What'd you do?
So in December of 2021, we got in touch with the machinist union, and we initially began our organizing with them. I was talking to we were talking to so many people. Some of our cadres at the shop joined up with the IWW because I was in the IWW getting mentorship and all that stuff.
Okay.
Unfortunately, they didn't have any resources in Kentucky. They disbanded their last chapter that they had here, and it would have been really difficult to try and start your own chapter of a very based union when what Kentucky needs is it doesn't even have business unionism here yet. So yeah, we went with the machinist union and did a lot of good organizing. Um, these people were with the Grand Lodge, so they were sort of at the headquarters. That meant that our campaign had a lot of conflict of interests with what we wanted to do on the ground and what the machinists wanted to do,
Hmm.
what they would have had us do. There were many times where we wanted to do walkouts, things like that. And the machinists were like, if y'all walk out, then we're just like going to stop endorsing your campaign. So even though we continued to build up our rank and file movements, we had to continue. We had to balance like how much we actually listen to them or not.
Sure.
These a lot of people viewed it as West Coast liberal elites trying to tell us what to do.
Of course they did. Uh, well, I
And
it's
oh,
just
sorry.
a quick side note. Like when I was a union member and worksite leader, et cetera, there were plenty of times where I did not see eye to eye with the leadership of the union I was a part of, and it was contentious at some points because they were doing things that I thought were dumb, like backing candidates that had no chance of winning, and like further hurting the cause. But anyway, I feel your pain in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. And so many of these other organizations were just unavailable. As you can imagine, because the labor movement sort of had this springing to life again, that everybody was overwhelmed. Especially like I know Ewok had like just started, I first got in contact with an EWOC organizer, at least around like the beginning of 2022, stuff like that. We wanted to keep our options open, but the entire Amazon labor movement at that time was gearing up towards the Amazon Labor Union,
Sure.
the one that had successfully unionized in Staten Island.
Yep.
So it took us a little bit, but eventually we got in contact with Chris Smalls and the executive committee over there. And, they offered us unconditional support, stuff like that. So
Sure.
we joined up with the ALU in July of last year and became the first chapter outside of Staten Island to start organizing.
Okay.
Which I mean outside of New York. There were some other shops in New York organizing around that time.
Sure.
But the crackdown really started after their victory. They had security guards walking around, checking the bathroom every 45 minutes, when they used to rarely check the bathroom. So they were
Amazon
looking
had security guards checking the bathrooms for people.
Yeah, checking the bathrooms. Not really for people, but for materials.
Oh, okay.
Because Amazon liked to do these stupid things. They were called installments. So they had
Okay.
some kind of they had a message that they wanted everybody to know about, like an upcoming thing going on with the company,
Hey.
upcoming benefit or something like that. And so they would just, have these little laminated things in the stalls, and they just like slip a piece of paper in there, and then you can read that while you're taking a shit, or use it as toilet paper, whichever one.
Either one, whatever you needed. Yeah.
And they were afraid of people like leaving union material in there instead of the installment. Just swap
the
it
company
out.
approved stuff. Yeah.
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 And they had these security guards also. They would stay in an area of in your work area for like an hour at a time, which was longer than they normally would. So what they would normally go there for was just to like look inside of garbage cans and stuff. Because they were like looking for like beer cans and cigarettes and things like that, or proof that somebody
piss bottles.
Which piss bottles.
Yeah.
Oh god, there were quite a few of them at that facility.
Jesus.
People think it's just the drivers that piss in bottles. No, it's
I heard it was the line workers, right?
Yeah. So I found some laying around before, and we report it to management, and they're still not going to give anybody extra bathroom time. They're still going to count everything against you when you're using the bathroom.
You talked about contacting the ALU. What I want people to understand, because I want people to be able to understand how to help themselves organize, right? So like, what types of things were you doing amongst your peers to try and get the word out? I imagine most people were using cell phone text messaging or some app or something like that. Were you hanging out after work, like in get-togethers to try and commiserate and get and form your organizing that way? Like, what specific types of activities were you doing in that regard to like help organize the place?
Oh yeah, it was I actually had obviously I was talking to people all the time with the safety committee stuff.
Sure.
But when I was making my rounds, I would always have like my information just ready to give out to folks. So instead of like going around and making people nervous, asking them for their stuff,
sure,
like just give them your thing. You explain like what you're doing, what how you can help them, and whenever they feel comfortable, they will contact you. And then a lot of people would just contact me like during the shift, after the shift, and we'd start like arranging times to hang out after work. One of the popular places in our area was like the bowling alley. Well, there's only one bowling alley in this rural area, so you get different friend groups of coworkers who go to this bowling alley at different times. And so I would go there and start meeting up with workers, and we would sort of become friendly before we start like getting like into the serious stuff. because there's a lot of pressure in organizing. There's a lot of risk that you're asking people to take on just by meeting with you. And so we did that. Of course, we got everybody connected through different group chats on other platforms. We liked Signal, but that was for like the really important stuff. Otherwise, because a lot of people don't want to download an app like Signal because they're normies, we had to use stuff like Facebook Messenger and things like that, where you're very limited in the amount of planning that you can do, because Amazon has its paws on Meta, because Meta uses Amazon Web Services cloud computing technology.
Okay.
So they could use that to spy on you if they really wanted to.
And I'm sure they were.
We also couldn't use Zoom. We instead would use Google Meets because, for those video chat meetings that are good to have. Because Zoom is also using the same servers as Meta.
Gotcha.
And they can actually put somebody in your meeting without you knowing about it on Zoom. So I had to be very careful. A lot of people don't understand that Amazon is a cloud computing business, and not much of a retailer. The retail division wasn't even profitable for most of its life. It was all about the cloud computing, where they would use the profits to subsidize all their other operations. And what they would do with those operations was gearing up towards these monopolistic practices that Amazon does. How they put so many brands out of business just because they copy the actual design of the brand and sell it as their own.
Yeah, I read a lawsuit a few years ago about them doing that.
Yeah, it's horrible how they do that, and that's just the capitalism that is allowed to flourish right now.
Right. But it's a feature, right?
Yeah, it's a feature.
It's a feature of capitalism. It's not an accident.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
It's been happening forever. Look at Standard Oil. When you had Standard Oil, they broke up for a few years because of antitrust, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then all of these companies essentially just got back together again. Like they just merged together, and it's the same shit.
Yeah. Chevron bought Texaco, stuff like that. After knowing Texaco, intentionally polluted the Amazon for years and years and years in Ecuador. That's for another conversation.
For sure.
So, you don't work at Amazon anymore, right? You were fired from there.
Yeah. The retaliation against myself was really intense. They started like writing me up for, making up stupid ass reasons to write me up in April of that year when they started doing the shit with the security guards. So,
all right.
They even called the cops on us, like on our first canvas. When we had like some organizers from Northern Kentucky come and help us down. They were also with Socialist Alternative. They're the people who are organizing at that air hub today.
Okay.
Shout out to them. They're fucking awesome. But yeah, they got the cops calling on them too. Amazon called the cavalry, man. They had the sheriff show up.
They're so scared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had the sheriff show up first, and then after the sheriff was done talking to us, 2 city cops pulled up, like, to block the other lane of traffic. And they accused us of blocking traffic.
Naturally. They're cops. They're good at projection.
Yeah, it was management trying to accuse us of blocking traffic, too. They called us union protesters in the Washington Post article, where the journalist called the police department to ask them why Amazon called the cops on us. So the company called us union protesters. When we were just collecting a little bit of information, having people go across the street so that they could go to the table that we had set up, and they could learn a little bit more there, fill out their paperwork, you know.
Awesome. Wow. So, did you? I imagine you didn't take that firing lying down, right? Did you?
No, I didn't.
Did you seek counsel for that?
Counsel, yeah. I already had Amazon labor unions lawyers. Their lawyer, Seth Goldstein, and Seth was all over my case. Like he filed an injunction right away, which didn't go anywhere. But all my unfair labor practices were documented. Um, Soon after that, I started, you know, meeting up with my NLRB, the assigned attorney, so
Mm-hmm.
that I could give my affidavits.
Sure.
The dude was really awesome though. He kept coming down from like Cincinnati to meet me at my local library to do my affidavits and everything.
Nice.
Which that's a 3-hour drive. So, props to him for doing all that multiple times.
Sweet. Yeah. So, do you and have you had resolution from? Presumably, you filed a lawsuit or someone filed a lawsuit on your behalf for you being fired for union organizing.
So we went through the board process of that,
Okay.
and I had my hearing back in September,
Okay.
September 6th. But
Gotcha.
I tell you, the NLRB is not a friend of the people. Um, because as long as it took me to wait, and then at like the 6 month mark, I was they started switching around my attorneys and shit. So the original guy, he went on some kind of medical leave or something like that. And then I just had to wait to find out who my attorneys were going to be. They didn't get me in contact with these attorneys until about August. So then these attorneys started meeting with me to do trial preparation, all that good stuff. But it was just a while there that I was in the dark. And I was trying to get other unions to help me out, with labor lawyers, stuff like that. But as you know, unions are territorial and bureaucratic at the moment. So since I wasn't organizing with them, they're like, well, we're not going to provide you with a labor lawyer. We can't do that. You're not one of our members. Um, so like, okay, well, we can refer you to this labor lawyer who costs $300 an hour.
Sure.
So I had to use like tools like Chat GPT and other AI to actually help me find out and learn all this legal stuff.
Sure.
learn how to write these documents that I needed to file in legalese, and refer me to all of the appropriate case law that
Sure.
would,
Statutes and stuff.
yeah.
Gotcha.
And so it was a lot. It was being my own lawyer, but at least there was a little bit of technology to be used, because otherwise, who would I have got help from? I was talking to everybody. I was trying to get with everybody.
Sure. So, do you have a resolution yet?
So we had a settlement agreement that went in. We had a settlement agreement that everybody agreed to on my hearing date, but yeah, I'm not going to be going back to Amazon. That's part of the settlement. It's not really a big loss. I don't think I really wanted to work there again anyway. But yeah, the only thing I can't do is discuss the financial terms of it, of
Sure.
course.
Yeah.
But the NLRB General Counsel, they decided that they would appeal my settlement agreement. So they objected to it, and they're in the process of their special appeal. And it's a matter of policy for them. So they have to do this, quote unquote, have to do this, right? For any non-board settlement that doesn't include the arbitrary language they like to see. So
Okay.
default clauses, which gives them the right to take the employer to court in the event that they don't follow through with the settlement.
Okay.
but most employers follow through with their settlement agreements.
Yeah,
Because
I can't imagine. Uh, I'm just speaking from what I read in the news. I could see Amazon not following through, but you know, hard to say.
yeah, Amazon's followed through with their previous ones, like with Gerald Bryson, they had to award him $80,000 and his job back and stuff like that. But even Starbucks has fallen through with has gone through with their settlement agreements and abided by the terms.
All right, well, that's good.
Because it's a huge lawsuit if they don't.
Sure.
Because general counsel can prosecute them. It's just that the region as part of the settlement like couldn't prosecute them, so it would go through DC. Um,
Gotcha.
but yeah, I'm still waiting on the results of this appeal. So they filed the special appeal, and then Amazon, their counsel, filed their objections to the appeal.
Sure.
Basically, the NLRB feels like, oh, the judge didn't weigh our decision carefully enough. And
Who knows?
they just want to see that language in there.
I don't blame them for not wanting that language in there, especially if it's like a matter of course, because otherwise they'll have no recourse, right? If they actually don't follow through. I mean, I get why that language is good, but yeah, I don't know enough about it to say much more than that.
Yeah, but the main things were like it went through without my informed consent. Like I
Hmm.
didn't know that they were just gonna try and overturn any settlement that we made
Hmm.
with the company. Because the objective of the NLRB is said to make the workers whole again after they experience these unfair labor practices. And that's not exactly what they're doing if they're gonna try and make me go through the whole process again, and then go and have a trial that I don't see as necessary.
Sure. Sure. Well, I imagine that process is going to take weeks or months, right, to get through the
Yeah,
appeals.
it's already been almost 2 months
Hmm.
since the appeal was filed, and I'm just waiting to hear on the results. Which there's relevant case law that supports our settlements. Like a lot of Starbucks workers were cited because they have a lot of similar settlements with that company.
Sure.
Um, and of course, it was a unilateral settlement too. So the union signed off on it. Well, Seth Goldstein signed off on it. Um, the judge signed off on it. Littler Mendelson, Amazon's counsel, signed off on it. And that sort of gets to the point. One of the funny moments was you should have saw them come into the hearing and then just look at the NLRB attorneys and this huge stack of evidence that they had on their desk. They just
That's
kept
pretty great.
staring at it. They were intimidated because we had subpoenaed every damn manager in that place.
Nice.
We were just getting everything we could. We were trying to subpoena Amazon Web Services to actually learn how these algorithms and stuff worked.
That would have
Um,
been awesome to get that.
yeah, and we wanted to know if they had facial recognition technology in the fulfillment centers,
Hmm.
which is something that Amazon actively develops. They have contracts providing that stuff to Israel.
Right. Damn. All right. So, hopefully you'll get a favorable resolution, right? Um,
Yeah,
but
I hope so.
yeah. All right. So let's switch gears a little bit. You mentioned it earlier, and I want to bring it up because I think you had mentioned it as something you wanted to talk about. You mentioned EWOC, which is the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee. That's a project of the Democratic Socialists of America and the United Electrical, Radio, and Machine Workers of America, or UE. And their goal is to build a distributed grassroots organizing program to support workers organizing at the workplace. And one of the main things that they offer, at least that from their website that I gathered is they offer organizer training. So like they would train a person to go in and organize the workplace they work at, to turn those people on, to get their cards signed, and then to get their union vote. So what do you know about EWOC, and what experience do you have with them?
Oh, I love Ewok. As I said, I first met an Ewok organizer in the beginning of 2022, and it was a dude from Cincinnati. So like he lives in my hometown where I grew up and stuff like that. But he contacted me. He was there for our campaign. He was always there, giving us advice when we needed it and all that stuff. So I have a favorable opinion of them. I'm biased, but I love being an organizer there. Everything at Ewok it runs like a well-oiled machine. That's what I can say.
Okay.
They're highly organized. They have, as an organizer, you don't even have to do a whole lot except for take the campaign itself and then start talking to the workers. It's very convenient to update your notes for the campaign. They do it all on Airtable. And they have people there. You don't even really have to look for a case. Workers who are interested in organizing, they fill out the contact form. That contact form goes to people who volunteer for the technology side of things. They sort everything and they find the organizer that is closest. And then they go ahead and ask you like, hey, do you want this case? It's this worker. They're organizing, let's say Walgreens or whatever. And then you start. But Ewok realizes the most important thing in organizing. It's that when you're coming into a campaign to endorse it and to mentor these workers, what you're doing is you're alleviating a lot of the stress that is on these workers that is a barrier to organizing for them. So you're coming in there and you're allowed to take over a lot of roles and you're allowed to be there for these workers to really alleviate that stress and those barriers. And Ewok also understands how necessary it is to have the cooperation between all of these different organizations. As you know, the DSA Labor Commission is one of the founders of Ewok. They're half of it. And then you have the IE, which is over there. But they've built out this coalition of people. Even Labor Notes is very much with Ewok. They work together synchronistically. Since I'm working on a Walgreens campaign, I'm working with workers who are organizing at Walgreens as a part of the greater national campaign. Labor Notes, Ewok was connecting me with Labor Notes journalists and stuff to give them updates about how it's going. So you could almost think of Labor Notes as a media arm of Ewok.
Okay.
And of course, the Troublemaker School has all of these organizers who are with Ewok and various different other unions that come together to teach everybody how to organize.
Right. So I want to ask about one thing you mentioned about taking kind of the pressure off. If you're going through organizer training, you said that you're trained to help take the pressure off the people at the workplace that want to organize, right, or that want to make things better. I imagine a lot of that is just simply informing the workers what a union is, how it works, what they need to do to form, right? Like all of like the specifics that people that don't have any knowledge or are on the outside looking in but want a better workplace just don't have, right? Or they don't know where to start. Is that an accurate assessment?
Absolutely, but we also have all of these resources. So whenever we go into our campaigns, we can just sign into our Airtable, and we're always updating the status of these campaigns. we can choose to get more Ewok organizers involved in this campaign if we need it. We have volunteers with the NLRB that work with Ewok, so we have labor law consultations whenever we need it for our campaigns. And of course, Ewok sessions. We have a monthly membership meeting where it's sort of like a training. So last month we had a labor lawyer that was on a Zoom call with all of us and informing us and answering our questions from our campaigns about all these different labor law issues. So we're there to also like inform these workers, like, hey, something illegal is happening. Like, hey, this is retaliation.
Sure.
And of course, we're there to connect them with the union resources that they need. Because Ewok isn't a union, and
Right.
a lot of workers don't want to form a grassroots union. They don't want to start their own union at the workshop. They want to go with somebody. So
Sure. Yeah.
it is also up to the Ewok mentor with the campaign to connect them to the right resources, and especially with the local DSA chapters.
Gotcha.
If they know you're from Ewok and you're working with these workers and you're also a DSA member, that sort of expedites the process of getting these workers help from the chapter.
Okay. Excellent. All right. So want to talk about something that you mentioned it to me. I was not familiar with the term or the concept, but I really, really love it. And that is salting. So according to the Industrial Workers of the World, the IWW, salting is the deliberate act of getting a job at a specific workplace with the intent to organize a union there. And I'll have all the links and like citations for this information in the show notes for anybody wondering where I'm getting that information. But I love that idea of like going in and pretending, you basically are doing the exact same thing any kind of corporate dickbag would do, right? To screw over everybody that works there. But you would be doing the opposite if you did that, right? You'd be going in, yeah, I love this company. This is great. I'm going to work 70 hours a week and you don't have to pay me and whatever, just totally sucking their ass and being a bootlicker, right? But in the background, you're actually organizing the people that work there. So what do you have any experience with doing that in particular, or is that just a concept you wanted to chat about?
I haven't salted myself.
Okay.
Because that would entail like I get another job.
Right.
No, I haven't found a job yet. And I likely won't until like the contract, my settlement agreement is fulfilled, because
Sure.
like one of the things Amazon has to give me is a neutral job reference.
Gotcha.
Which is, yeah, everybody knows, like if an employer searches up my name, they're gonna know what I did.
Yeah, they're gonna find out. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to get a job.
Right. I understand.
Not for lack of looking, because in Kentucky, you got to look for a lot of jobs to be eligible for unemployment.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so even after my unemployment benefits ran out, I still looking for jobs all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a concept to talk about. I have mentored people and like convinced people like, hey, you need to go and salt. People come to me and ask me what to do. They're asking me, how can I get a union off the ground? How can I get involved in the Amazon campaign? I'm like, well, the number one thing to do is get a job there. Because if you're an outside force, then the workers will always think of you as an outside force. They know that you don't have the experience. They know that you don't have the same lived experience as them.
Right.
And that'll always create a divide there. So go ahead and salt that workplace. First, join some kind of union, even if you have to join the IWW. That's good.
It seemed like when I was reading about salting in particular, it seemed like a relatively old practice. And I say old as in like it's been around a really long time, it sounded like, from what I could gather. And I don't know how much. I'm just curious how much it's still actually going on, right? Like, um, I would love to do some kind of like in-depth study into that or something like that. Maybe I'll do an episode about that.
Oh, well, let
Some
me
kind
tell
of
you,
like
buddy.
deep dive.
Let me tell you, buddy. Starbucks workers, they love salting. They love them some salt.
Awesome. That's awesome.
They they have the concept of each one teach one. And so what they do is they'll organize one store and then people will volunteer. They'll go to another store, take everything they learned from that experience, and then organize another shop.
Sure.
And they're doing this everywhere. How do you think they've organized such a massive amount of stores?
300
Almost
some stores.
500.
Yeah, it is over 400 now, isn't it?
Yeah, over 400, almost 500.
Yeah, crazy.
Of course, Starbucks did a little bit of retaliation of their own.
Sure, they've been firing people left and right for organizing.
Yeah, and which the NLRB cases, the NLRB has ruled in favor of Starbucks workers much more times than they have the company. And then so yeah, they got that going for them. Starbucks is learning that this fuck around and find out game is not is not going to go their way
Not working
too
out
much
for
longer.
them. Yeah.
But they did get involved with the National Right to Work Foundation, which is one of these NGOs that sort of created right to work states in the first place. And they've done like a couple of successful decertification campaigns.
Sure.
If you watch the Valley Labor Report, they're a show that specifically focuses on Southern labor, and they always go through successful unionization campaigns. So they'll name off a company, where it's from, and how many workers unionized. But they'll also go through like the certification campaigns that were successful,
Okay.
which really breaks my heart to hear that.
Yeah, that just right to work in general is nonsense. It's a bullshit phrase. It has nothing to do with your right to work. It's just, pretty classic regressive behavior for
Right to work
for
for
naming
less.
things. Yeah. Yeah, right to work for less. Exactly. It's it's fact that states that have right to work laws on average have lower wages than states that don't. Just
Absolutely,
across the board, especially in union jobs, but not
Yeah.
just union jobs, everywhere. So
because unions set industry standards.
right, yeah, yep.
We look at Tesla right now. Tesla is trying to organize with the UAW because these workers
Saw that.
were watching. They were watching what was going on with the big three.
Yep.
And now Toyota just gave their workers a wage hike.
I saw that. Yep. Yeah, they see
Yeah.
that coming because Toyota's not a union shop, is it?
No.
Yeah.
There's like one or two locations that might be unionized. I think there's one in Illinois that is,
Gotcha.
but as far as any other locations go,
The big
no,
ones like in Texas and Houston and stuff like that, those are other places. Those ones definitely aren't, I wouldn't think.
definitely not. Or
Yeah.
in Kentucky. In Kentucky, we have the Georgetown assembly plant that I mentioned earlier. They opened in the 80s. The UAW has had so many campaigns there, and they lost every one of them because the
Damn.
company knows that they want to sweeten the deal when workers start organizing.
Right.
So they're going to bribe workers out of organizing.
Yep.
And that's the Toyota philosophy.
Which is against the law, but
It is. It is.
they do it anyway because our laws here are pretty shitty, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
They're definitely
Yeah.
not worker friendly, that's for sure. They are
Like if we look at
friendly.
if we look at Japan, all of the Toyota shops in Japan are organized.
Of course.
And of course all the other automakers in Japan are organized.
Yeah. Only in America. People want to lick the boots of people making 10 times the amount they are and think that they can have it too if they just work hard. It's just not the case.
No.
All right. So one thing I want to talk about, or the next thing I want to talk about, is something you also brought up that I wasn't familiar with, and that is that there are venture capitalists funding organized labor. So we got a couple different ones to talk about. The first one we'll talk about is an organization. It's unionbase.org. And so Unionbase is considers itself a digital safe space and global social networking platform for unions and union members, as well as a search engine for people to use to find unions. It was founded by the former president of the Progressive Workers Union, PWU, Larry Williams Jr. It's my understanding you've had some contact with, I think you said Larry, and maybe even Union Base in particular. What can you tell me about that?
So union base, I'd like to go off there. If like a regular individual comes and registers an account with union base and all that stuff, you would be able to search for unions that are already on the platform
Okay.
of union base. So you'd see like some Teamsters locals, you'd see some IAM machinist locals. You'd see a number of unions, but not many. And even fewer of those numbers are actually active on the platform because it just really hasn't gotten anywhere.
Gotcha.
Now they do publish resources for organizing once in a while. Um, it's a newsletter. I forget what it's called. I think it's the workplace ledger, something like that. But this that they publish, it had some decent guidelines. Larry had founded Progressive Workers Union, but he's not really involved in it. He hasn't been involved with it for a number of years. He went on and started organizing with the Teamsters. And he did that for a while until he sort of got disillusioned with that union. So he decided he wanted to build this platform. Um, Larry is a very ambitious person. Union base, Union base made a lot of concessions. They got funding through venture capital. Um, and then Larry sort of tried to use it to integrate it into his other projects. One of them, which is Labor DAO. It's a decentralized autonomous organization, so sort of a crypto governance structure that you would see on Web3 in that domain. Listeners can research that. It's too complicated to get into right now. But
Sure.
Larry, being so ambitious, he wanted to make all these other projects to try and help organize labor. But it really just hasn't panned out the way he wanted to. And what I think we need, unions need to be innovative. They need to start using technology. So I would love to see something like Union Base, but built by like a coalition of unions, or a coalition of labor organizations, without the venture capital aspect and
Sure.
without being privatized,
Yeah.
sort of try to make it into a cooperative or something like that.
Sure. Sure. So, of from what you know about union base, what do you think was the most helpful feature? Is the most helpful feature for organizers and or um, just workers in general?
Mm. I'd say the most helpful features was the newsletter. They get pretty good information in there, but also, yeah, there's a number of unions that are active, and that are easier to touch base with through Union Base
Okay.
than with trying to like fill out their contact form and their emails and cross your fingers and hope for the best that they contact you sooner.
Gotcha.
Um, so you can really use it to start networking with unions and other individuals that are a little bit more tech savvy.
Sure.
So you
So,
can
go ahead.
um so you can ironically you could probably network with a bunch of these tech savvy individuals and then go out and build something different than union base.
Gotcha. Um, I from a previous job, I have experience working in software and with which managed services. So I don't want to get into too much about the specifics, but basically a company would sign up to use the software of the company that I work for to manage their like drivers. They had CDL drivers and things like that. And it's, I'm saying this because I think there's a correlation between what you talked about with some of the people are really, really active on Union Base and some of them aren't, even though they're on there. You know, they have an account, but they don't really use it. Like I saw that a lot with the companies we did business with. A lot of them, their bosses would sign contracts to use our services, but the people that were supposed to be doing it just would never buy in, and their bosses would never push it down on them to have them use it, right? So you have to get buy-in from everybody involved to make a piece of software like that work. And it sounds like, obviously this is from way 10,000 foot view, right? But it sounds like the ones that don't necessarily, that might be on there but are hard to get a hold of or just aren't very active, is because they just don't have that drive to use the software, right? It sounded like a good idea at the time or whatever the case, right? But or they changed leadership after they got in on it and then they decided not to use it, whatever the case. I have no idea, but I just know that that's a thing that happens with especially pieces of software and new pieces of software, especially for people that haven't used software for that type of thing before.
Yeah, and then like with something like Union Base, with the venture capital funding aspect, with it being tied to that, you're gonna get. I mean, these venture capitalists, they expect a return on investment.
Yeah, 100%.
And they're not going to get that from something like Union Base. So somehow you've just convinced them to make a big donation to your platform, and then they don't get a return on investment, and then so you're not going to be able to fundraise anymore. So then you're going to go and be ambitious like what Larry is, and try to get some other methods of fundraising for that platform and to integrate it with his other projects like Labor DAO, all that stuff. But like nobody's using it, and now because it's obvious when something's venture capital funded most of the time,
Sure.
because of the reporting standards. So when people learn about that, they don't trust the platform either.
I could see that. Yeah, especially because I think, well, we'll talk about another one in a second. But yeah, I could see that 100% once union members find out they're using a platform like that was funded by, you know,
Bloomberg.
historically unfavorable companies that are historically unfavorable to workers, right? Companies, let me rephrase that. Companies that are historically unfavorable to workers, that are, you know, flat out capitalist pigs.
Yeah, it's like, hey, we're the Pinkertons. We're going to
make this thing for you. Do you want to use it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, those assholes. All right. So the second kind of venture capitalist thing I wanted to talk about was called unitworkers.com. So they are for sure funded, at least in part, maybe in whole, but at least in part by Bloomberg Beta, or by Bloomberg, which is part of their like venture capitalist arm of Bloomberg. It's some kind of beta part of the organization that's not, I guess, my interpretation of beta means it's not fully hashed out yet, but it's functional, but there might be stuff that they still are trying to work out. At any rate, according to the LA Times, Unit's business model works like this. The startup's organizers provide free consulting to groups of workers organizing unions within their own workplaces. They help them build support to win elections, advise them on strategy and contract bargaining sessions, guiding them through paperwork filings and legal obstacles. And then once a contract is in place, the members of the new union can decide to pay Unit a monthly fee, like traditional dues, to keep providing support. And Unit Workers was founded by Jamie Earl White, who did labor organizing as a grad student at MIT, where he helped organize a solidarity campaign with campus janitors pushing for better pay and working conditions. So just one thing I want to mention you can see there are that there are people that want to help the labor movement, right? That come from the labor out of labor, right? Larry Williams, I think, is a good example. He founded a union. I don't know where he came from before that because I didn't look it up, but he founded PWU, and then he founded Union Base to try and help. Right now, this person, Jamie Earl White, same thing. He noticed, you know, that the janitor staff at MIT were not getting a fair shake, so he helped them organize. Right. I think that's where you can see kind of a cohesion, right, with people, that there are people out there that want to help the labor movement. It's not all the bullshit you hear on TV about how unions are wrecking things and unions are doing this, right? It, basically, anytime you hear about a union on TV, it's they're just, the person reading the story is just reading the press release from the fucking union or from the company, right? When I don't know who the hell was it, Hostess or whatever, years ago, when they were going under, they put out a press release that just said, yeah, we can't afford to pay people anymore because the union costs too much. And like people on the local news were just reading, I could tell they were just reading the fucking press release from the company. And it's like, dude, you fuckers, you didn't mention that those assholes filed bankruptcy 3 times in 10 years. That's not the union's fault. That's your fault for running a shitty company. Right? It's like, so it's one reason why I brought this up is because I want people to understand that there are people out there that are trying to help, right? And that it's a little harder to find them sometimes because of all the bullshit propaganda from capitalists everywhere you look, right? Constantly trying to tell you you don't need unions and et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I brought that up. I went on a rant there. I apologize. But what I think you've had some experience with unit workers maybe also. What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my first time making contact with unit workers was when our campaign started to gain a little bit of publicity. And so this person named Megan from Unit contacted me on Signal of all places and started wanting to chat about like what they could do for us, how they could help us, all that stuff. So Megan and I had a few meetings, and honestly, it was quite corporate. There's like you mentioned, like this dude the original founder came from his roots being in labor. But even if you were somebody who was in labor and you were a salty dog for the labor movements, once you start to live that good life, that comfortable life of Silicon Valley startup type of shit, you get comfortable, and then you're not really chomping at the bit anymore. You're not really having this purpose. Now your purpose shifts to, how do I make these investors money? Because if the capitalists are good at one thing, it's that they're great at spotting trends. So if they see that the labor movement is trending and labor's organizing everywhere, they're thinking to themselves, how do I make money off of this?
Right.
And so, yeah, that's what they tried to do. But overall, the interactions with the unit were so sketchy. I couldn't even organize with them because you have to have a small workplace of under 200 workers.
Okay.
So they said, like, we can't even really help you. You can't really use our platform. And I checked it out as long as I could, but as soon as I'm like, my workplace is too big, they're like, get off of here.
Yeah, we can't help you. Interesting.
And I mean, there have been like a couple of campaigns that were successful with Unit, and the workers, I mean, from what I've read, they're happy with what they got. They pay less to Unit than what they would pay in union dues, which is great for them. And
Sure.
They got all the support they needed. They got all the resources they needed, because it is much easier if you have a bunch of legal professionals helping you from the beginning of your campaign.
Yeah, right. For sure.
And that's what Unit offers.
Yeah.
So very good intentions, very good resources, but I just want to think about like what happens when those venture capitalists stop making their money when they realize it's
Yep.
not possible. It's going to be another project that runs out of steam and out of money,
It very well might be. Yeah, for sure.
and that
And
nobody trusts them. Like
yeah,
even you hearing about Unit for the first time, you have your doubts.
yeah. And I read, so in that LA Times article I mentioned, uh, they quote, and I don't remember the quote off the top of my head and I didn't write it down, but they quoted one of the guys from Bloomberg and he said, look, we're only doing this with things we think we can make money, right? We're not doing this out of some altruistic like vision to make workers' lives better. We're doing this because we can make money off of it, right? And that's what you're talking about, like where people aren't going to trust it necessarily because they know it's not coming from a place of wanting to actually help the workers. They're just trying to make money, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Which is the root of capitalism and the rotten roots of capitalism, right? That trickle that push down and just infiltrate everything and ruin it. Anything good is ruined by capital. It just is. It's just how it works.
Yeah, they have gotten involved in so many different movements. And they put their money in there and they ruin it. Like the AFL-CIO went on to dominate like most unions in South America, and then they were doing this labor imperialism under the guise of wanting to help the workers. And what did they do? They sold these workers out to the United States financial interests and
Right.
created banana republics.
Help the CIA do coups, probably.
Yeah,
I
they
don't know.
did. They
I don't know if that's true or not, but it wouldn't surprise me.
they were very involved in the Chilean coup.
Hmm, great.
Um, yeah, they suppressed workers' militancy, so these workers weren't encouraged, and their union didn't allow them to actually go out and help defend Allende.
Gotcha. Um, all right. So I want to kind of put a little bit of a finer point on the venture capitalist thing. So, it's I brought it up to talk about it because there are resources there to help people, like you said. But people need to take that with a grain of salt, right? Use it for what you think you can use it for and what you think is good about it, right? And if you just get a bad feeling about it, just stop, right? Like you don't that's just the way it is, right? And if you really um if you don't think you're getting anywhere, at the very least, just go on the internet, find any union by you, anyone, doesn't matter who it is, because they can, it doesn't, you can be a healthcare worker and you can organize with the machinists union. Nothing that says you can't do that, right? So it's like at some point, just call a union and say, hey, I want to talk to somebody about organizing my workplace, right? They aren't, most likely aren't going to tell you no. Like that's just, they want, one, they want the money coming in because they're an organization just like anybody else, right? But they know that by bringing in new people into the fold, they can open up the market for them. They can lift everybody up, right? That's the idea. And so at the very least, just call anyone in your area, right? And, even like the big ones, call SEIU. Just go on the SEIU website and look for a local in your area and ask them, say, hey, they might say, hey, we can't help you in that area, but we'll give you contact information for somebody else that does. That's the point of like why I brought this up. I want people to have that understanding of what, at the end of the day, just call somebody, right? Or email them or something.
Yeah, you have to be out there. Well, and what I'm going to say is go and fill out the contact form on Ewok because this is
Sure.
one organization that will answer you back really fast.
Yeah. Excellent.
And if you're anywhere near the West Coast or the East Coast, not as long as you're not in the South, you will get somebody that's pretty close to you. There's not a lot of Southern organizers for Ewok yet. I'm one of the few. That's why I was getting assigned a case in Louisiana,
Gotcha.
of all places.
Gotcha.
Luckily, I have a contact in Louisiana. One of the machinist workers I went to, I was working with on our Amazon campaign.
Mm-hmm.
He went and started working for a local down in Louisiana.
Awesome.
which was really convenient to get this campaign and then already have a connection.
Sure. Oh, awesome.
And one more thing about venture capitalists. When I
Sure.
was reading around and talking to people from units, they were saying stuff like, oh, 90% of our workers might just go ahead and go with a different union when it's contract time, and we might not even make any money. Is one of the things about unit.
Yeah, they get the option, right, to pay unit their dues, basically, to have unit be their, who represents them after the contract is in place, or to whatever, if they happen to get a contract through a different union, right, then they wouldn't be paying unit.
Yeah, and I don't know if any insiders from unit would talk to me today, but I wonder if like they have to make workers like make that commitment up front nowadays.
They might, who knows? Yeah. Yeah.
Because that just sounds like something venture capitalists aren't going to be very interested in. So we're going to give you all this legal advice and stuff like that, and we're going to hook you up with all these resources, and then you're going to go with a different union?
Yeah, they wouldn't be happy about that. That's for sure.
No.
Right. Like if they weren't getting the return on their investment, right? Like if especially the funders, if they were getting their money back, they probably wouldn't give a shit. But if they aren't, then obviously that's going to be a problem. Yeah.
Absolutely. And these venture capitalists, I mean, they can be vengeful capitalists.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, no. They're assholes mostly.
Vulture capitalists is what I used to call them. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Vulture capitalists, definitely. All right. So now I just got a couple of general questions left. So, for what do you think is the best way to build solidarity in the labor movement, and how do you think that can be applied to like intersectional solidarity between other movements like climate justice, racial justice, prison reform, things like that?
Oh, I mean, it's just like it was in the olden days when the IWW was making the rounds. You have to get all of these different organizations to work together. If you have labor that is organizing, well, you have to have some people that are committed to getting the community organized. You get your labor union working with your tenants unions. Well, workers are renters too. There's one intersection right there that's going to go off the top of your head, and now you're going to be organizing against the boss and the landlord. It's the same struggle. And then you're going to do what they used to do back in the day. The socialist parties were just scouting around in Appalachia back in the day, and then they run into some coal miners that wanted to get organized. And these coal miners were mostly funded, armed, and trained by the socialist parties. And that's how the United Mine Workers was birthed and all these other unions. That's how the Harlan County War was fought. That's, many decades of union struggle in coal country in Kentucky, or what everybody knows about the Battle of Blair Mountain. They were armed by the Socialist Party, and it's mostly realizing that your interests align the same, and getting everybody integrated and working together. The most efficient way to do that is to start looking out for people's material interests in the here and now. I tell union organizers a lot that a contract is a pipe dream. And until you achieve a contract, you are running your campaign off of hopes and dreams. And that's about it. And that's not a sustainable source of fuel to be running a campaign off of. Because eventually your motivation just falters. You hit that stage where you're burnt out from doing all this organizing. And so if you want a recent example, look at what they did over in Staten Island, New York, when they were organizing the Amazon campaign. Chris Smalls, Derek Palmer, several of the OGs in that movement, they were out there feeding workers every day. They were providing for their needs. They were paying for their bus ticket. They were paying for their ferry to get off of Staten Island and back home. and having all these potlucks and having all these good times. So if you contact the union, you might want to contact Food Not Bombs while you're at it.
Sure.
Because they can come up, they can feed the workers. That gives you a chance to talk to everybody. One of the first things I asked the local Teamsters was how quickly can we get a barbecue together? A barbecue right across the street, maybe in the church parking lot that's right across the street from our facility. How quickly can we get that together? Can you all arrange for that? Because we need to have workers from all of the shifts coming together, dining together, talking, socializing, and hearing our message, and then getting involved. So we see solidarity being built, and what I want people to analyze right now is look into the Starbucks Workers United campaign.
Yep.
And look into the customer action events. We've had 3 events so far. It's a partnership between anybody who wants involved. So, of course, the DSA is heavily involved in the Starbucks campaign. So is EWOC. So is Socialist Alternative. Just all kinds of groups. And they really made this organizing open source. So the first customer solidarity event was called Adopt a Store Action. Starbucks Workers United had mapped every union location and then mapped every location that was not yet unionized. Anybody can go and see these maps on their website.
Yep.
And what they decided to do was to make tools where you could host an event at any one of these non-union locations. And anybody could RSVP to those events. And you get in contact with your Starbucks workers and stay updated, and they help you with every step of the way. The actual Starbucks workers that are sort of staff at Workers United, which is a division of the SEIU.
Yep.
And the first events for customer solidarity had locations, had events at more than 400 locations. That was incredible across 38 states. Because somebody asked, what can the customer do to get involved? And they saw that the company actually listens to the customer, unlike with the workers.
Yep.
And so that gets the entire community involved because you're going to your nearest Starbucks to do this. And the second events, we had a petitioning in August, right? So we were informing workers of the union busting that Starbucks is doing, and then we had a petition that was meant for the CEO. Well, this time it was in a lot more than 400 something locations. It was in 500 locations across all 50 states. So because of the success of these solidarity events, we just got a massive amount of people involved.
Awesome.
And so I hosted 2 locations, both of them at a location in Danville, Kentucky. And I can tell people, you might think you live in a conservative area, something like that. But once you get out there, you really start to cross those lines. You really start to bridge those gaps when you're out there in front of the customers' faces. When you're out there showing everybody how compassionate you are. And so the next Starbucks workers event will be November 16th. It's a Red Cup Day. That's usually when Starbucks gets out their limited edition red cups, right? Get your pumpkin spice latte in your red cup.
Yeah.
But this time the Starbucks Workers United is going to be hitting them on multiple fronts. You can essentially mobilize the entire left around this because now it's come out that Starbucks supports Israel. And they support Zionist and genocide. So now you got everybody across the Palestine movement aware of Starbucks.
Yeah.
And they also know that there's a union campaign.
Yeah.
So now they're going to show up and they're going to say, hey, why don't you support this union? Because they support Palestine and the company's trying to sue them for that.
Right.
So now there we go. We just got a massive amount of people mobilized
Right.
to support Palestine. And now all of them are going to be intermingling with the labor movement.
It's awesome.
Yeah, that's one way of building solidarity.
Right.
So, and I mean, a lot of the time, it just organizing around something that happens,
Gotcha.
capitalizing on that,
Sure.
on that momentum that is created.
Yeah. I'm glad you said momentum because that segues directly into my next question. So kudos to you for seeing the future there a little bit. So
I got my crystal ball.
Yeah, right. So the last 6 months or so, we've seen a huge uptick in labor organizing and or labor action, right? So for example, we've seen strikes from the Writers Guild, from SAG-AFTRA, from the UAW, from Kaiser Permanente hospital workers, we've seen that hospitality workers in Las Vegas or authorized a strike. I don't think they've taken it yet, but they authorized one. And there are others. I'm sure I know there are others. I'm not going to name them all. But what do you think the proletariat can do to keep the momentum going and to expand further?
Really, as material conditions continue to decline for the masses, that's sort of what started this uptick in the labor movement in the first place.
Right.
Is that in 2020, at least for the Amazon part of the struggle, it was around organizing because the company wasn't taking COVID precautions in the beginning.
Right.
That's sort of what started it all. And that was a threat to everybody's health and safety, and it still is. The pandemic is still going on.
Right.
And so what we got to do is continue to be there to support everyone while their material conditions continue to decline. And it's all about taking care of everybody's needs in the here and now. So we got to get these proletariat people out here with the workers. We got to continue to integrate the movement. Like what I've seen in Northern Kentucky with the Air Hub at Amazon organizing, how they've successfully integrated their whole community with the local Northern Kentucky Tenants Union, with the big organization Socialist Alternative, and now Workers Strike Back.
Okay.
You really have to realize this and capitalize on this intersectionality and continue to find ways for the customers to get involved in these actions, and continue to use these unions, which have a lot of money, a lot of the time, a lot of resources, to invest in other things. Push your union to get involved in primarily marginalized actions and direct actions for marginalized folks.
Sure. Excellent. So I guess that's the end of my formal questions. Do you have anything else you'd like to talk about?
I could circle back real quick to something.
Sure.
So when it comes to these new types of organizing that are unfolding, we really have a new atmosphere that we're going to have to adapt to. We have, and I go over this and I ask myself this every day: how are we going to organize the new workers in tech? Like the new workers that are going to be working in Web3 and quantum computing and stuff like that. That's something interesting to tackle. That's something we need to learn how to tackle. And not everybody can start just a chapter of Food Not Moms in their area. A lot of ordinances that go against a lot of ordinances in cities that go against like feeding people hot food.
Right.
that go against feeding the homeless and stuff. And there's some ways around that. Like some organizations are just giving out like Walmart gift cards and stuff so that homeless people can go and get hot case items or leaving around a community fridge or a community pantry. But how do we make mutual aid organizing technologically advanced?
Sure.
That's a conundrum, and it
Yeah.
raises a lot more questions and answers right now.
Sure. Sure. Well, to your point about the new tech workers and like software programmers and things like that in particular, a lot of it I think will help with the fact that the first visual effects uh, company just had their workers organized, right?
Mm-hmm.
The I think it was the Marvel folks just organized within the last month or two. I can't remember what it was. I'd have to look it up, but um, you're starting to get in. 30 years ago, that wouldn't have been computers hardly at all, right? Obviously, they were using computer graphics back then, but nothing like they are now, right? So if you can start getting those visual effects people who are obviously going to be using computers for a lot of stuff now, I think that's going to start helping filter out to the rest of the people that. So you've got the people that use the software, right? Forming unions. The visual effects people use the software to create the TV shows and movies, right? Commercials. That eventually is going to filter down with help, I think, to the people that actually write the software, right? And that's what you're talking about, right? So it's like
Mm-hmm.
that will help, right? If you just start expanding within the industries that are adjacent already, like the visual effects workers organizing, that's kind of a natural thing because SAG and the WGA, who are obviously heavily involved in movies and TV, that's their whole deal, right? They work alongside those visual effects people, right? Might not be standing next to the person physically on set, right? But you work alongside in that they're helping create the same movie or TV that show that you are helping create, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one way that I think it will help, and I think I don't even remember which union those guys joined. I think it might have been a machinist union or something. I can't remember, but like they should be who organized them should be on the prowl now for more, right? I'm sure they are already, but like they should be taking what you said and trying to figure out how to do that too, right? And talking amongst everybody. The best way to collect as many new types of industry people that they can get, right? While still making sure that the ones that have been around forever keep growing their numbers too, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I guess like this is sort of like something that I know that Larry Williams, like the founder of Union Base, sort of like brought this up to me, like sort of the people that are involved in these crypto spaces, these Web3 spaces, DAOs, all that stuff. They always bring up this conundrum that's happening. But like the visual effects companies, they sort of screw themselves, they sort of screw the pooch on that because all they want to do is hire contract labor. And then overwork them,
Right.
underpay them, and screw them over that way.
Yep.
Like, but that's something that in the Amazon struggle has always constantly been something that's hard is to get the warehouse workers communicating with the tech workers because we are downstream from the tech workers. Like all of the algorithms that are used to suppress us
Yep.
and to make it hard to keep our jobs, that's the tech workers.
Right.
So we need them to organize or else it will remain so dauntingly hard to organize an Amazon warehouse.
Sure.
We need them to do some malicious compliance there, sabotage one of these algorithms or something, just
Right.
to let employees like keep their job long enough to organize.
Sure.
And so yeah, bridging that gap between those workers is it's a task.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's something that hasn't really been successful. Like the Amazon Web Services workers who are organized, they've showed up for Amazon workers at the regular level. They've showed up a few times, but as of yet, it's not often.
Gotcha. All right. Well, hey Matt, this has been great. Great discussion for me. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. And contact Ewok if you're interested in organizing your workplace. I can't stress that enough.
Yeah, excellent. I'll have the link for Ewok in the show notes. So, or you could drop either one of us, a note on Instagram. You'll have our handles will be in the show notes too. So, Matt, if you want to quick plug your handle on Instagram, that would be good.
Yeah, it's the @ is Unionize Amazon KY. Just all one word.
Gotcha. All right.
And that's all across social media.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, like I said, thanks, Matt. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it has. Great talking to you again.
That does it for the show. Don't forget to rate and review on whichever platform you use to listen. Special thanks to Nick Josephs for the use of the theme song. You can find Nick on Spotify and on the web at nickjosephs.com. You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. If you'd like to support the show, you can subscribe on patreon.com/voicesfromtheleft or donate on buymeacoffee.com/voicesfromtheleft. All the links will be in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and solidarity.